Welcome again. I am Emily Zayden. I'm the director of the Craft in America Center in Los Angeles. We're so happy to have you all watching today and joining us. So pleased to have this esteemed group of artists with us as well. Each of these artists is participating in our current exhibition, which is up into mid-September. So please come and see this incredible exhibition of some of the finest craftsmanship in the country today. It's also available to be viewed virtually from our website. So check out some of the images and objects that way if you're not able to visit us in person. Without further delay, I'm going to welcome these three members of the Traditional Cowboy Arts Association, who each have different and interrelated practices. We have exceptional objects on view from each of them, and they're going to give us just a very encapsulated taste of what their backgrounds and practices are like today. So thank you for distilling decades of expertise into a short little glimpse for all of us today. We're going to be starting with Wilson Capron today, who's joining us from Cristobal, Texas. Wilson started his practice in 1996, has been working in metalsmithing as a bit and spur maker, honing his expertise for all of these years. And Wilson, we will start with you. I encourage everybody to please put any questions in the chat that we can address after each of the presenters share their slides. We'll have a Q&A at the conclusion, and that's all for Wilson to begin. Thanks so much. And I'll ask Ernie and Carol to we'll turn off our cameras and mute while Wilson's on. Thanks so much.
So here I go. Hello, everybody. Let me get this going. And all right. So as Emily said, I'm a bit and spur maker and a custom maker. So I take a lot of orders and I go through a lot of different ways to build a bridle bit and a pair of spurs and belt buckles. So what I decided to do is to basically start in the beginning, kind of the first stages, not the most fundamental, but kind of where I start with my process, and then we'll go all the way through it up with some of the pieces that you'll see in the show at the end of the slideshow. So anyhow, here's a bit that I've made, hand forged mouthpiece, simple architecture to the style of the steel, nothing too intricate, pretty straightforward. All the silver is overlaid, so it's soldered on top. Then it has the customer's brand on the butt of the mouthpiece there for kind of personalization. Here's a pair of spurs, same thing, simple overlays, and brand on the button, our brand on the band, and then the initials on the button of the spurs here. Thing we can do next is engrave all the steel around the silver. So the spur itself is basically the same pattern as silver, nothing too intricate or complicated, but then engrave all the steel. And steel engraving is takes a little longer. It's not harder to engrave. It is certainly a stiffer material, but I actually enjoy engraving steel more than I engrave in silver. I feel like I can do more with it. So this certainly increases the budget a lot, because all the shading and everything you see in the steel is done one little bitty line at a time. So certainly increases the time frame. Here's a pair of spurs. You notice the same brand. This is one customer's order, so a nice pair of spurs, and now a nice bit to go with it, and kept with the same motif, kind of making a matching pair out of them, where you have the partial silver overlays and the engraving in the steel and the brand. And you notice the little bevel on the shanks here at the top and towards the mid part have a running leaf pattern, which kind of match the spurs. Here's a bit that I actually made for the TCA show last year. Oh, my bad. Let me go back. That I made for the show last year that called The Dead Man's Hand. Wild Bill Hickok was shot in the back playing poker, and he had a pair of aces and a pair of eights and an unknown hand. And so that's a little bit of storyline to what's going on. We have little added elements of architectural design, and that the steel on the outside is not perfectly flat, has a little dome to it. So that adds a little bit of time element to it, and then getting the silver soldered on and fitting properly. Just another little thing that it's an extra little small detail that adds an element of dimension and interest to it, but also adds a little time frame. Uh-oh. So here's a pair of spurs, and again, nothing too extravagant with the architecture of the spur itself. We've added a lot more silver to it instead of engraving any of the steel or leaving really any steel exposed, as I've covered the whole pair of spurs with silver and three different pieces, put their initials on there. And this individual was number 4 in the chain of the name given, so Quattro. So we put the Roman initials 4 on the button there and all that. And little side note to this pair of spurs, it's a young man that's on the rodeo trail and doing really good and using these spurs a lot. And not always are our products used an awful lot. People feel frightened because they are pretty fancy and they don't want to mess them up. But this young man's using them, and it's quite the honor to see him doing what he's doing, using these spurs. All right, so now we're going to step things up greatly and get more complicated. So again, we have small portions of silver overlay in the middle of the band, and we engrave the steel like we did the previous 2 things, but now we've added bevels and inlay to the deal. So an inlay, to describe inlay briefly, you create a cavity in the steel and then pound silver into that cavity. The bottom of the cavity is wider than the top of the cavity, so it's mechanically held in place by the bottom being wider. And so it takes a little more time. It's a little more protected, something that is an old traditional thing for sure, but adds a little more time element. So this increases the budget a lot because time happens on it. But this pair of spurs is worn by a man in the National Reining Association. He's a $1 million rider, quite accomplished. And so these are his everyday spurs, and that is fun to see as well. Here's a bit that kind of goes along with it. We've increased the architectural design. You know, we have a little bit more going on with the Santa Barbara style bit shank here. The California style bits and spurs tend to be a little more ornate in design and the architecture, a little bit, which is really fun for me. California style bits are my favorite thing to do. So even though I'm from Texas, this is fun stuff. So a lot of again, just sterling silver overlays, engrave the steel. I French grade the engraving in the steel with a black oxide finish on the bit. Got a little color contrast going on. And then if y'all notice towards the middle of the shank and up towards the top left corner in the photo there, I've added gold center, 24 karat gold centers to the flowers, and just little sparkles. A little sparkle of gold is always a topic of interest and of value. So now over to a belt buckle, a steel buckle. I just recently finished this one up, and we have a sterling silver overlay around the outside edge for a border. This particular customer was a lion hunter, and so the lion means an awful lot to him. And I have to tell you, it was very complicated for me to design this piece because the customer was very picky. There was an awful lot of time developed in the design part of it, and we went several different directions before we got it right. He certainly challenged me when I did a normal engraving scroll design around the lion, and he said, I want tracks intertwined in the middle of it. And man, that kind of scared me. It was a little difficult to get that designed right. But at the end of this, and then so doing the figurehead of the lion and the sketch of all that is out of my comfort zone a lot too. I don't do a lot of figures and portrait style engraving, as mostly scrolls and leaves Now, so this certainly took me out of my comfort zone, but at the end of it, I was glad the customer took me there, and I was pretty excited about how it all turned out. Um, Another pair of spurs that we've added a new complication time element to the budget of the project, and all the silver you see is inlaid. It's all inside the cavity of the steel, created cavities and put in the steel with steel engraving. The brand in the center is 24 karat gold, and so pretty fancy pair of spurs. This went to a really close customer, close friend that she's quite accomplished in the National Cutting Horse Association, so doing quite well there. This bit is along the same lines, and all the silver you see is inlaid. This was built for the 2013 TCA show, and I recently just had a man order a variation of it just like it. So it's kind of fun to relive it. I just got finished with it last week, so a lot of fun. But you see a ribbon style of the running leaf border going through the steel, and then the silver inlays on there. So a lot of work. Those are big cavities to cut out and get all silver fitted in there and all that business, but it's fun. Here's a pair of spurs that were pretty fancy. Went to a professional horse trainer, a guy that's made the National Finals Rodeo multiple times, a healer, close friend. And his mom bought these for him for Christmas one year. And so, no, let me back up. I have a wrong customer. These spurs went to California. And again, a nice customer. It was a man and wife that bought spurs for each other for their anniversary. So in the center of the band where the brand is, you see relief engraving. What you've been seeing in all the steel engraving I've done up to this has been a fine English scroll, so it happens a little faster. The center part of the engraving where the brand is, the gold brand, all the metal is removed away from the design, and so that adds another element of time into the process. Belt buckle here, relief engraving in the steel. The silver oval has silver filigree, so it's like the relief engraving, except you can cut the scrolls out, solder them on top of the silver, so it doesn't take quite as much time, but you get the same effect. So this was a really nice buckle. Has a nice buckle to do. A lot of fun. Has silver pinstriping along the edges, kind of frame everything out. And, yeah, that was fun. Another buckle, relief engraving. This gives you a better look at the relief engraving, how it actually sticks up. And I got the pinstripe silver and gold inlays around the borders, the edges, kind of twisting the bevels, create elements of dimension, and some fun stuff there. Big gold brand. And then here's the last ultimate part of engraving, and that sculpting. You can see in the close-up of how this steel is actually molded to have a three-dimensional effect. And so I built this bit a couple years ago for our show. Simple architectural design for the most part, as far as architecture, but then when you get off into the engraving, there's an awful lot that goes in there, lots of dimension. The background is inlaid in fine silver, and then there's a couple different dimensions on the border where you have a beading that goes around the edge. And then below that, there's a half round kind of cupped border that goes in. And then below that was the silver. And then there's 24 karat gold grapes overlaid on top of all of that. So lots of dimension, a lot going on. There is an awful lot of time spent in that piece right there, even though it doesn't look quite as intricate as some of the others I've shown you. It's quite a deal. So this pair of spurs you'll find in the gallery. They're crafted in America. I built these in 2018. Again, all sculpted steel, and then the background is inlaid in 24 karat gold. So just an awful lot going on with that guy, and one of my favorite pair of spurs that I've ever made. That was a lot of fun. And then here's the last bit that I have, and you'll find it in the show as well there in Crafted in America, inlaid 24 karat gold borders with fine silver and all engraved up. again, when everything gets inlaid like that, it takes quite a bit of time to get it all finished up. So anyhow, I hope that was helpful and exciting, and thank y'all for allowing me to participate.
Thank you so much, Wilson. The work is just exceptional. I'm so glad that your photography captures the detail. It's nothing like seeing them in person, but it does them justice. So thank you. We'll circle back after Carol and Ernie present. Next up, Carol is going to talk about her practice. She started working with leather in 1998 and is a more recent, newer member who's joined the Traditional Cowboy Arts Association, creating her work in saddlery and leather. She's joining us from Dillon, Montana. Carol, I invite you to present your images.
Hi. Well, hello everybody. I started leatherwork quite a while ago as a full-time leather worker in 1998. This little video was made for my TCAA project from last year, 2025. And this little videos were supposed to come up at the exhibition with a QR code. So it shows kind of a little bit about my history, the saddles I built from the start. These were probably when I was a couple years into it. And I built a lot more show saddles. This gets a little more recent. I got into the more Visalia style saddles and yeah, watching these videos. So that was a little saddle I made for a Pendleton show. It's supposed to be a working type saddle and I won, yay. But now this shows a process of making the saddle that was at the show. So this is how it all starts. It's a pattern drawn on paper. And like a coloring book, got to go inside the lines and fill it all in with detail. That was pretty challenging. I didn't, all these little flowers are different. They didn't follow a pattern of the same stamped flower here and there. And there I'm dyeing the background so that it gets a real two-tone effect. And I started using an airbrush. It kind of gives a more smooth transition to the dye instead of using a dauber or a brush for larger spaces. So there you can see the dye work really highlighted all the tooling. This little part doesn't get seen much. That's a gullet cover. It's kind of hidden. There's a tree. There's your base. There's your ground seat. And the parts being fitted one by one. And I thought I'd put some color into it and a little dimension. Those flowers are overlaid onto the leather, little separate pieces. And yeah, this pretty much shows my processes. There you go, the coloring book, the pattern applied to the leather and then filled in one flower at a time and then dyed. And it's pretty much a repeat process through making the saddle, and then you're fitting the pieces, trying to work the designs so that they all flow together from piece to piece. And this horn cap, that was made by Scott Hardy, great silversmith. And it also, the horn cap kind of signifies everything being almost done. So it was a really good feeling to put that on. And here's a finished little saddle. And I was pretty happy with it. There's always things that could have been improved on, but that's just the way it goes. Every project for me, it's a learning process and will probably be that way to the very last saddle I build. And so that was my first year as a TCAA member in 2025. And this is my shop you see behind me. It's a mess, but it's where I work. It's pretty much where I live, to tell you the truth. Yeah, the leather work, full-time job starting 1998, and I started building saddles in 2003. And I studied under a saddle maker for about a month and a half, and from there started just on my own. And I was encouraged later on taking some pattern drawing classes from a founding member, Carrie Schwartz. I was encouraged to apply for the fellowship, and received that in 2017-18, and then applied for membership a few times, and in spring of 2025 was successful. So this, what we're looking at here, this is my 2026 project saddle that's currently at the museum in Oklahoma City. And you can see how it goes from just that little pattern on the paper, so simple, just little lines, and how it's being filled in flower by flower, section by section. The leather has to be at a certain moisture in order to get the depth of the carving, and so you're not beating up your elbows as you're pounding on the leather, but also to get, you can see the variation in color. So it has to be at the right moisture level. And that's why I have this is a seat piece, and it's a big piece of leather. And I couldn't get it all carved in one day. So the plastic's on there to retain the moisture for when I get back to the project. Because this seat, I think, took me about 3 days to carve. Yeah, that was a complex design for me. But yeah, next. That's the finished little saddle. And you can see, yeah, that was a complicated one. And that has a lot of background dye and an antique finish on it to really highlight the tooling. I was able to get the tooling itself at a pretty good depth, so I was really happy with that. But all the dye work just really makes the design pop from a distance, so you can see it from a ways away. And I try not to make the flowers and designs too small, so that from a distance you can see what's going on, that it is tooled, and that doesn't just look like texture or something. And you can see there on the lower part of the stirrup, close by the stirrup, and then up behind the seat, there's some little pictures. And I was trying my hand at some figure carving, and I haven't done it long, but the whole idea, once you're, in the TCAA, is these projects every year, we are asked to push our artistic limits, and successfully, hopefully. And so for me, this was a real push. So I incorporated the little figures, a little bit of braid work, bead work is on there, and you can see the bead work on the back. It's a TCAA logo, and I just thought it all went together with a Native American theme. So I guess a bit about this tooling pattern. They're supposed to be morning glory flowers, and I've got some. You can see the little curly cues there in certain spots. How the morning glories climb, up buildings or fences or other vines. And I wanted this saddle to be a tribute to the Native Americans, the first people here. And because the Western lore would not have been the same, obviously, without those folks. And I really wanted this as a tribute. So the morning glory flowers came about as I was doing my research on what type of flower to put on this saddle. And it turns out the morning glories were they signal a symbolism for resilience and renewal. And they die off during the evening, they come back the next morning, and they're also used in a lot of um, traditional medicinal purposes. So that's where the flowers came from. And then I wanted to do some little pictorial pieces that like I said, I haven't done much of this. The figure carving, boy, that was a challenge. And I'm not like a painter on canvas or anything. So this dye work was a real challenge too. But all the little pictures on the saddle are actually from Charlie Russell paintings. Charlie Russell was here in Montana, great American artist. And these are the things he saw and painted. And I just thought I really wanted something from someone who saw it firsthand, and also pay tribute to him, to Charlie Russell as a great American painter. So that's where I got all these little figures. And of course they were adapted for leather. Like the paintings on these were much bigger, and there was a lot more in the background, but I had to pick and choose what focal pieces. And here's you can see here what I'd taken my design from on one of the pictures. And all I could really fit was the two buffaloes in the foreground and the brave on the back on his white horse. And I was fairly happy with how things came out. But it's kind of funny as you're working on something like this and a little bit of learning as you go, things get a little nicer looking and a little nicer looking. And luckily, this was about the third one I did. This was one of the first or second ones, so I was still learning the process, but I was happy with how these little guys look. And from a distance, they look maybe a little bit better than right close up, but I still liked them. I was happy with how they came out. And I was pretty happy with how the whole project came out. Next. Oh, there's the saddle again. And there's the little bison. This is, see, here's the beginning carving. And this is where you try to get the depth into the leather. It's hard to tell, but those little pictures, those little figures actually stand out quite a bit from the leather. The leather behind them, all that background, has been stamped down as deep as I could get it so that the pictures themselves stand pretty proud against that background. And then when I did the dye work, obviously I tried to make it look like the Charlie Russell paintings, but I also tried to give it a lot more depth so it looked a little more three-dimensional, and even not dyed. And nothing is dyed there at all, not the flowers or anything. You can still see that there's quite a bit of dimension. And I really enjoyed doing this. I'm going to try to do a little bit more of it again sometime, but I really enjoyed this project and the process. I learned a lot. Next. Yeah, there's the little coyote crossing in front of the buffaloes, and you can see how far back they go. There must be, in his day when he saw these things, there must have been thousands of them, something that we're never going to see again, which is why I think these paintings by these masters are just such a snapshot of history that we're never going to see again. I mean, I can't see a day when millions of bison, buffalo are going to be roaming over the hills again. I don't see that happening, but that's why I enjoy these paintings and art from the old masters so much. And that's why I wanted to use, especially Charlie Russell's, on my saddle. And for my saddle, I had to move the little coyote. He was moved a little bit closer to the bison there, just to make everything fit without a big blank spot. But I felt the little coyote was important to get into some of the pictures on the saddle too. Next. And there he is, and you can see how I moved him up. And things on leather without the paint, without the dyes, they don't look complete. I'm not done yet with the figures. They're not completed in the carving and the tooling. And you can see obviously the flowers and the vines aren't, but you can see how the process goes. And again, there's my plastic trying to keep the moisture into the leather as I go. Yeah, that was fun. There's things I do differently if I had to do it again, but it was a good learning process. And next. And there's the paint, all the paints, the dyes, getting the dyes right. It's really to get the colors correct. You know, it's not just you got some paints and you're putting brown on there or putting black on there or the white for the horse. It's thinning down the dyes to where you have to put layer after layer after layer of color to highlight what it is you want your bright colors to stand out, to show where the light is shining onto them. And then you want to be able to show the depth, like the musculature and things. And so that takes coat after coat of, you know, thin layers of dye, and then getting to certain points where you have to start blending the colors of that. And it was tedious. It was a lot. It was funny. The carving wasn't that much. It didn't take that long. It's the dye work. I I mean, this took me probably 6 hours to figure out, and you wouldn't think it would take that long, but to really get it to look right, it was a real tedious process. And then what happens now after this, where it got to this point, I take an antique finish, and it's like a paste, almost like a shoe polish type of finish that goes over this. and it stays in all the parts that have been carved. It goes into the deep parts, and then you rub it off. And so the parts that are higher, the dye or the antique finish is rubbed off of that. So you really get a highlight of the high and low. And that makes all the colors blend a little nicer too within the little figures. Next. These are also a part of my projects for the museum for this 2026 exhibition. So these are spur straps, and they're on the pretty fancy side for spur straps with no hardware. This style is called a dove wing. And so you can see the little holes where the center of the flowers, that's where one spur button goes. And then you can see the three little holes on the other end, and you can't see, but there's little slots. There are two little cut slots about 3/4 of an inch long, and that goes into the opposite side spur button. So it just makes for a real utilitarian, real simple pair of spur straps. But obviously they're pretty carved, and the flowers are pretty small, so they're pretty detailed, and that was one of my other little projects. Next. And then this little bag, I thought it was cute. It was actually something that I saw Carrie Schwartz had done not too long ago, and I was intrigued. It's a nice little bag. It's actually a pommel bag, and it's pretty much how it would sit on a saddle, except that little strap is long enough to be wrapped around twice around the horn, or go through the gullet hole if you needed to, and to stay secure. But I thought, and Carrie had got it from, and it was an older pattern that he had got it from. And I thought, gee, that's just kind of a nice little deal for the show. So I made it to be more like, if it could be a woman's purse, that strap is long enough to be a nice little shoulder bag. And I really enjoyed making that little thing. I really enjoyed that little bag. So I guess that's about it. That's about it till thanks for looking, and thanks for being here, and thanks for having an interest in our trades. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Carol. Fantastic overview of so many incredible facets to your practice as well. Next and last today, I just want to mention that unfortunately, John Lesma was not able to join us today due to a fire that is nearby where he is, and we're wishing him well. Ernie, you will be joining us next. Ernie Marsh is an NEA Heritage Fellow, one of the founders of the TCAA. He will be our next presenter. He started working in making bits and spurs as a metalsmith in 1990, and we are so happy to have you with us today. It's an honor. So we'll switch over to your slides and get you started.
Thank you very much. Well, this is Elmer Miller. He was a 1993 National Endowment for the Arts Fellowship awardee. He was my mentor, and I want to talk a little bit about the tradition and the history of how this art form is handed down through time. Elmer here, him and his cousin got their start in 1946 in San Francisco. They learned a little bit from a guy named Rafael Gutierrez. He didn't show them a lot, but they admired his work, and they learned enough about it to get things figured out. These trades weren't openly shared not that long ago, actually. That's kind of a new thing. Rafael Gutierrez, he apprenticed in San Francisco in 1905 from Bill Dake and Raleigh Van Buskirk. And that was also in San Francisco. We don't think of San Francisco as being the hub of Western gear, but in the late 1800s, there was a lot of it made there. And this just shows kind of a progression through time of how these trades get passed down. And Wilson and I and our fellow TCA members are trying to do the same thing now. Next. This is the beginning of the process where patterns are just scribed out on bare metal, and well, it has ink on it, so I could see the scratch marks, but we get started right there, and then I go to the bandsaw to cut them out. Next. Yeah, I think most bit makers I know are still hand filing just like I do, just like it's been done for hundreds of years. Next. Hammers and chisels. That's still a thing for us bit and spur makers. And this is where I'm trimming overlaid silver, trim the excess to make the solder stick on a full overlay. I hang it off just a little bit. Then I'll take those silver scraps and clean them up and melt them down again and roll them out. Next. These are some old timers. This left to right, we've got Al Pacetti and Al Tejan. They were also founding TCA members. Then we have Lon Davis and Herb Snell, who were also good friends of mine, and they were also mentors to me. And we've got Carl Norris and Buzz McKittrey. And Carl was a silversmith from Reno, and I think Buzz was too. Next. This is humble beginnings here for me. This is in Jordan Valley, Oregon at the Big Loop Rodeo, 1994. You can see all that inventory. We didn't have the internet in those days. We would work for months just to take and go somewhere and see if we could get paid for some of those months. You might notice the wheels at the bottom of that case are kind of exposed. That thing would roll up, fold up, and fit in my 1972 Ford station wagon. Next. We're moving up in the world here. We're down in San Ynez at a bit and spur show. Got an extra kid there, but we still had the same station wagon. Next. This is my shop in Westfall, Oregon, probably in the early 2000s. Obviously, I look a lot younger there, working on a spur. Next. This is my boy and I at our place in Westfall, Oregon. That's far eastern Oregon, about 50 miles from the Idaho border. Next. This is a TCA piece from 2009. Got a little inlaid gold and silver trim, high relief steel engraving with filigree work, which is where you actually cut the background out with a small saw by hand. Next. This is another TCA piece from 2017, I think. This is an old pattern. It's called the Conquistador pattern, and I got this from Elmer Miller, the actual pattern anyway. Next. This is a concho bit with a bee motif. He's made out of silver and inlaid with gold. Next. This is a pair of Spanish colonial style spurs that I made for the Traditional Cowboy Arts Association exhibit. A lot of filigree work in the steel. This pair of spurs, the inside of them are just as fancy as the outside, and to tell you the truth, I got about 5 months into that pair of spurs. Next. This is a Santa Barbara style full overlay with sterling silver with gold accents and gold overlaid star. Next. This is a pair of spurs from last year with a snake motif inlaid in 22 karat gold with a pair of Chuck Storm's spur straps. I was quite lucky to get Chuck to come out of retirement and build those for me, but he did it, and I'm thankful. Next. This is a another Santa Barbara cheek piece. I kind of I kind of specialize in the California style stuff that Wilson was talking about. It's kind of what turns me on. I'm from California originally. I moved from there as a small kid, but I do really like I really like that California style and the Spanish traditions. Next, this is a pair of spurs made by Wesley Wimmer of Paso Robles, California. I feel a special connection to him. Back in the 1990s, I was invited to the San Ynez show, and I thought, boy, I better impress those people because they know all about these California bits. I need to do something special, and I designed a cheek piece that I thought was just going to blow their minds, and I got all the way down there, and the first guy that walked by my booth said, "Oh, that's a Wes Wimmer pattern bit," and at first I was a little disappointment because I hadn't heard of him before, but on my way home, I thought, if me and Wesley Wimmer think a little bit alike, that's a good thing. And so he's always stuck in my mind. He was a World War I veteran, a postal worker, a good cowboy, and a bit and spur maker his whole life. Next. This is the pair of spurs that the last pair inspired me to build, and they're at your show right now. So that's off a Wes Wimmer pattern from Paso Robles, California. I should mention that Wes died in 1986. I think he was born around 1910. Or excuse me, no, he was born in 1896, died in 1986. So he was 90 years old. And I wished I'd have got a chance to meet him, but I never did. So next. This is actually the bit that's in your exhibit. This is where I'm hand chiseling the filigreed portion of the steel. I've already got the two colors of gold inlaid with a silver line entwined into them on a Celtic design, and the upper edge of the upper portion of this bit has the background inlaid in gold. Next. These are just some small pieces of a bit that bit that's in your exhibit. People would not stop to think about how much time might go into fabricating these by hand filing them. And so the rain hanger there is got that filed and chiseled head on it. And then the cross chain hanger there is a filed rivet. Next. And this is what it does is, so you take a punch, and where I've necked that rivet down, I will punch that into a countersink on the bit cheek to hold that in a cold friction method. It's the old timey way. And here's where it's all punched down, and as you can see, that probably isn't going anywhere. And I've left that peg on it to and we'll see in the next picture where I put that silver button on that peg and then riveted that over. So that's some really old timey methods there, and we're not gonna let those get away from us. I teach those all the time. This is some highly sculpted steel with gold and silver inlays on a spur band from about 10 years ago. Next. And now I like to do a little teaching. This is Duncan Clark from Colorado on the left, and me, and we're in my shop there. And so he's spending 3 days engraving with me at that point. That was last year. Next. This is my annual class. I do a beginner engraving class in Cody, Wyoming at the By Western Hands Gallery. And they provide a nice benches and a nice place there to have multiple people show up. Next. Oh, that's just a little forge work that Wilson's been teaching me. I must be forging a small part for a bit right there. Next, uh, overlaying gold onto a silver buckle. Heat comes from the underside, so you don't cook your gold. We're passing these methods on to our students all the time. Next, this is another picture of the class. You can see, I think Wilson has one too, but we have these camera microscopes to work through, which can be displayed on a large screen behind us. And our students can get a really close-up look at what we're doing without having to huddle around. And you can see there, uh, those all this engraving equipment is mine that I've purchased so that I would be able to put on these classes. And someday I'll get my money back if I put on enough classes. Next. Oh, and here we are, full circle. Last year I received a NEA fellowship in traditional arts. 32 years after my mentor, Elmer Miller, received that same award. And I really couldn't explain to you what I felt. It was pretty good. And I might also mention that I was the third, aside from Elmer, who passed away in 1993, uh, I was the third founding member of the Traditional Cowboy Arts Association to receive this NEA award. There was Don King in 1990, Dale Harwood in 2008, and me in 2025. And now this year, we've added a fourth fellow to the group of in Carrie Schwartz, who's gotten this award this year in 2026. So I'm pretty proud of our Traditional Cowboy Arts Association, and I think that might not be a coincidence. Thank you.
Thank you, Ernie. Amazing. So many questions that we'll jump into. I invite Wilson and Carol to rejoin us. I want to mention Carrie's with us today attending. A shout out to Carrie. Carrie's also going to be doing a talk that'll be both hybrid, online virtually, and also at our center in August 22nd. Looking forward to that very much. And while I'm mentioning it, also, we've got a second talk coming up that hopefully everyone will tune in for with the additional members, a few of the additional members who are participants in the exhibition that's coming up on August 13th. So please join us for that as well. To start, I just wanted to ask to begin, any additional information you want to provide about apprenticeships, and thank you for sharing that you're teaching classes, Ernie, and for Wilson, Carol as well. If there's any information you want to share about how people are able to gain access and more understanding of all your incredible expertise.
Well, I send everybody to Ernie that wants a hands-on experience, because that is the absolute best. I do have a Patreon account that has lots and lots of videos of me just joining the journey, me in the shop, and you're welcome to check out an awful lot of stuff there for information. But I strongly encourage the hands-on experience, and what Ernie's got's the best. So.
Question. So Ernie and all of you have mentioned your mentors. Understandable that that's really how training in this field works, and in much of craft for that matter. Wondering also if there's any sources books wise that any of you referenced even early on, or if really it was the person to person.
Yeah, I was lucky enough to meet an old gear maker, saddle maker, bit and spur maker named Bob Hall. He was actually from King City, California. And I met him in the 90s when he was in his late 70s. And he actually wrote a book on how to make bits and spurs. And I mean, some of those methods they're pretty old-timey stuff. I mean, you can do it that way, but you know, electricity is nice too. But that book was very helpful to me, and that process that I explained in there was right out of that book, and right from the mouths of the old guys that also taught me. So, How to Make Bits and Spurs by Robert Hall.
Great.
There's an awful lot of engraving literature out there too. Just a ton of it, of books on engraving person can learn from.
Mhm.
Any key source that you want to throw out there to everyone listening?
Ron Smith has recently passed away, but through GRS had a couple really nice books. Sam Alfano has a ton of information. That is a professional engraver that does a lot of teaching. He has a ton of content. So either one of those would be great.
Great. Carol, any?
Well, for saddle making, it's just pretty recent that we have access to books and things like that, because it wasn't too long ago when there was a lot of big saddle companies here in the United States. It was kind of a secret. Everybody had their style, the way they did things. And unless you were an apprentice, and you would have to apprentice for a long time, you didn't really get to learn. And they would hide their way they did things and designs and patterns, from the other saddle makers and stuff. So it's kind of that Encyclopedia of Saddle Making. Al Stolman. Al Stolman is the one who, I mean, there was some other fellows, F.O. Baird. He was a saddle maker in the earlier years, probably the 40s or so. He started putting out pattern books and stuff, and he kind of started. He was one of the first people, I believe, who really kind of started showing people how to do just the leathercraft portion. And then you had the Al Stolmans, who decided, we're just gonna teach people how to make saddles from start to finish, and really pretty comprehensive. So for a long time, that's all you had was the books, unless you had a saddle maker friend or something. But now with the internet, there's so much good information that you can get online, along with a whole lot of bad. So you have to know enough to pick and choose. But at least it can kind of give you a feel for what you're getting into. But the best way is hands-on, working with somebody and, spending a month or something with them. And that's how I had to learn. And I just think it's the best. And then as you go along, you work with different people in that trade, and you're gonna like some of the techniques from one person and maybe not so much from the other person. You're gonna pick and choose what works for you and, make it your own. And then I'm hoping this fall to start teaching saddle making one-on-one, after I get not living out of boxes anymore and get a shop actually all fixed up. So that's my hopes. I feel I need to pass it on.
Great. And you've made other kinds of leather work also over the years.
Oh yeah, you got to start with the little stuff to learn how to use the tools. I mean, it has to start really small and simple and safe, and then go up to the more complex things.
It's great. For all of you, I'm curious, you all were within horse community growing up around riding and actually riding, and how you felt, each of you, being drawn to the object and craft side of that world. If anyone has anything to share on that front. Wilson, I know you're riding, and how did you make that transfer?
It's not a very romantic story with me. I just needed a job, and the people I lived with were large production people, and so a lot like Forrest Gump, I just started running, and I'm still running. So I certainly grew up on top of a horse and around horses, and my dad was a painter, an artist. So the art gene was involved in me, and that's how, between that and the need for a job, and I always liked to make something. I just didn't know what. Here I am, 27 years later.
Ernie, when did you get drawn in?
Well, I always liked working with my hands. I remember my mother went to a wood carving class when I was about 7 years old, and she bought me some tools and she quit and I just went crazy with it. And I was wood carving and drawing and trying to learn how to paint. I never got to be a painter, but then always around horses and rodeos, and out of high school I went to work on a ranch, and I got to noticing that maybe some of them other cowboys had nicer stuff than I did, and I thought, maybe I could just make some of that, and that's kind of where it got going, and so I'd make me something and then try to hang on to it, but yeah, I'd end up selling it and making more.
Carrie Ann Quick, one of the folks attending today, had a slew of excellent questions. I'm trying to distill as we wind down here, a way to bundle some of them together. But for all of you, your design inspiration, and you talked about specific projects. I'm sure a lot of it is commission work, and so you have some starting point. But aside from that, if you could talk about, where your design inspiration comes from, and also even your stages, if you're starting from sketching or you're starting from some other way of working out your ideas at the outset. Ernie, feel free to take that first.
Okay. Okay, my inspiration, I mean, it comes from a lot of places. A lot of the old historical pieces, things that I've seen in nature, maybe just things I want to see if I can accomplish. That's part of the issue with me. I'm in a bit of a transition. My inspiration used to come from all the old timers I knew, and I could get on the phone and I could talk to them, and they could give me some ideas and whatnot. And but most of them are gone now, and that's why I'm kind of into teaching now a lot more than I ever thought I would. I seem to get my inspiration now from these young people that show up here all excited and want to learn the trade. And that pushes me even further because I want to be able to show them more.
That's great. Carol,
Uh,
design inspiration.
well, I started, I guess started out doing this because always had horses and stuff, but I discovered after buying my first property and things that I couldn't afford the gear that I wanted for my horses, so I decided, well, I'll pull out the little leathercraft kit that I got when I was a little kid and start making stuff. And that's kind of how it got me going into this. But the reason that I really love leather work and making saddles is I was inspired by all those old time saddles. I just thought they were beautiful. The mid 1800s, the Visalia saddles, just what beauty, that's in those days a tool basically, it was transportation. You put it on your horse and you rode, and I just thought, what a neat way to make something that's so utilitarian, just beautiful. And I've just always been an admirer of those things, and that's kind of what got me started. And then nature, flowers and stuff in nature, like Wilson and Ernie have a little, the bees and the butterflies and different things like that, different flowers. I try to interpret those things in leather too. So just when I look outside here, some of my hanging baskets with the petunias, it's like, oh, I bet I could carve that out of leather. I bet that might look nice too. So it's just inspiration comes from a lot of different things, and seeing other artists work, and it doesn't have to be necessarily leather. I'm inspired by Ernie and Wilson's. God, what they do makes my stuff look really easy. But I'm inspired by their work. So there's all kinds of places, all kinds of places.
Wilson.
Inspiration is my surroundings, a lot of it's regional, but the surroundings, things of beauty to me and my taste, architectural, I mean, nature for sure. But it comes from all over, and you never know where it's going to come from. Customers inspire me a lot as well. Depicting their stories can lead me down things like I was talking about the lion head buckle. Like that's not something I would have done, but it helped me and it created inspiration in that experience. So it all starts out on paper. To answer that part of the question, where does it start? If you can't draw it, you can't cut it. Whether it's with a bandsaw or a graver, you have to be able to create it. And so I am a technology guy. I'll use any form of technology you can, but it always goes back to the basics. So hammers and chisels and pencils. And so you have to be able to do it all, to me, but it all starts out with pencil and paper.
Great. And do you have any assistants in your shop and for each of you?
Head of security is my dog Shack. That's an assistant I have.
Mhm. I've got an apprentice, but he doesn't really work in my shop. If I have overflow, he'll help me out. But I've taught him to make saddles and stuff, and he lives on the other side of town, and he's becoming quite the leather worker in himself. So I think it's great.
Passing it on. Great. And Ernie?
My wife, Teresa, helps me out quite a bit. She'll cut patterns on the bandsaw, but mainly she just keeps track of all the computer stuff, all the business stuff, where we pay our car insurance and everything else too, so I can throw myself completely into this job.
Excellent. You mentioned carrying this tradition on, that you took it on, you've done what you've done in your role, and curious for each of you what you see as far as expansion going forward. Are you finding new interest? Anything on that front that you can speak to? And for that matter, anything as far as historic departures that are new and happening right now that you're excited about?
Yeah,
So-
as far as me, I spend a lot more time in the silver end of my business now. And
Silver
I
rather than steel, you mean? Or
Yeah, like belt buckles
oh,
and yeah, bracelets and jewelry items.
okay, other forms of adornment.
Yes, yes.
Great. And TCA wise, even, are you, is there a surge of new and younger folks joining this?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and that's the progression. See, when we teach someone, we're shaving 20, 30 years off their learning curve. And once they understand what it is, they kind of get to start kind of where we're at, right? And the progression's been going on for 100 or so years, a couple hundred years, thousands of years probably. I guess we're not carving on cave walls anymore, but so I mean, I hopefully maybe I improved Wes Wimmer's design somewhat, but had he not had it, I wouldn't have thought of that to start with. So I leaned on him. Someone else is going to lean on me. They're going to make something even cooler. That's just the way it goes, right?
The future is very bright as the TCA grows and develops and shares its knowledge. The amount of quality work that's being produced today is incredible compared to what it was 30 years ago. And so the future is very bright. It's very fun to see, and credit to the TCA for breaking down barriers and walls of education. I'll give TCA credit for that, Ernie and the founding members. So.
I was a fellowship member, before I got full membership. So the fact that they're willing to share that knowledge and help you kind of get over some problem spots. There's always going to be some sort of problem spots, but maybe they're just smaller than they were before. But to sharing the knowledge like that, taking the time and really caring that you understand and getting you to where you're doing a good job. That's what our fellowship program's all about. And then the hope is from there, that person will apply for full membership, which is what I did, and there's a few others, and that's kind of the goal of things, I guess, and so it's keeping the trades going, the craft going.
Well, thank you all for making that possible, making that happen, keeping them going, and for maintaining such an exceptional high standard of precise, innovative, and beautiful work in this day and age. It's just remarkable to see. So thank you all. With that, we're going to close today. So grateful to all of you watching, and especially to you for this fantastic presentation. A great day.
All right.
Ma'am.
Thank you.